This week on the Destination Angler.
I guess I'm probably one of the few people who can say I carried a president's wife down the bank into the river. We were at Fern Valley where we were located. There's a nice hole up top, and I believe President Carter may have even high-holed her and decided he was going to fish that area. So
it said, Rosalind, go somewhere else, huh?
We were trying to figure out a place to take Rosalind and get her in.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we've got shows on the Wind River Range in Wyoming, the Western Trout Challenge, Bristol Bay in Alaska, and a Colorado tailwater roundup. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on the lakes of British Columbia with author and stillwater expert Phil Rowley. Phil is an industry celebrity who has appeared on numerous TV shows and instructional videos and written many books and magazine articles. You will be amazed at the depth of his knowledge of lake fishing. You won't want to miss these shows. And be sure to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. Do you want to be first to know about new episodes? Well, head on over to the Destination Angler website and sign up. You'll be entered to win a free year subscription to Trout Routes. A winner will be selected on the next show. And today our destination is the Soque River in northern Georgia, and our guest is Stephen Tomasovich, better known as Big T, owner of the Soque River Outfitters in Clarkesville, Georgia. Northern Georgia is loaded with over 1,000 miles of trout streams and tailwaters. Who knew, right? The Soque is a spring-fed stream just an hour or two north of Atlanta, known for big rainbows, and I'm talking 20 to 25-inch fish, easy wading, in a mild climate with excellent year-round angling. Our guest, Big T, is a local boy, born and raised in Atlanta. He was a straight-A student and played college hoops, and after many years in the mortgage industry and a 30-beer-a-day habit, Big T discovered fly fishing. You could say fly fishing saved him as he turned from one addiction to another, spending 200 days a year on the water. This led him to competition angling, where he was initially humbled by a 17-year-old kid, but soon became one of the best. Today, he runs his fly shop and outfitting business and shares how to size up a stream and make the right adjustments, the tricks big trout play, his top confidence flies, and an overview of the top streams and tailwaters in the area, including one you've probably never heard of. Stick around to the end for a great story of a wily old 28-inch brown trout he had hooked 6 times before. So let's hear from Big T as he dials us into this Georgia peach of a stream. What's up, Big T? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we were talking just before the show. You've got some nice weather down there. Here we are, very end of November, and you guys are still fishing, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. We'll be fishing all year, all winter long. In fact, this is probably, for us, more of a prime season and a great reason for the folks that are climate this time of year to come visit us.
Man, it sounds like we're going to be maybe 30 degrees this week in Indianapolis, so I might be right over. You never know.
I'd say the average highs here generally are going to be close to in the 50 degrees just about all winter. Now, what you'll find is we'll catch days that it doesn't get out of the 30s, but those
Sure.
spells don't last more than 3 to 5 days usually, and we're back up into the 50s. So it's really an ideal climate for trout fishing in the winter.
How about that? How's the fishing been?
A little bit challenging lately. We've had a drought, so actually last night we got 2.5 inches of rain, so it's pretty blown out right now in the area. But low and clear water is it can be a challenge for the fish on the Soque.
Yeah, I'll bet. All right, I got to ask you, how did you get your nickname, Big T? I love that.
Actually, it's my high school buddies gave it to me. I was
Oh man, long time ago.
yeah, one of the bigger guys, and it kind of went awry as I went off to college, played college basketball, then grew into an offensive lineman after college. But there's a local trout fishing forum that I signed up for, and when I really got into it, and you had to create a username, and so I dug it back up, and it's kind of stuck from there.
Oh man, sounds like you're okay with it though, huh?
Oh yeah.
Very good. Well, my wife's grandmother is from Pickens, Mississippi, and she's got 9 brothers and sisters now. They've all passed away, but the nicknames, everybody has a nickname down there, and I just love the way that kind of happens in the South. Like somebody was named T Stubbs, another one EW, and I just think it's a lot of fun, colorful.
Oh, it is, and I had when I moved up to the Clarkesville area, there's a guy who guides a little bit named Thomas, he's actually, I hate to admit, I think he's bigger than me. And he said he went by Big T, and I had to tell him, no,
not
it's
anymore.
not going to work. You can't have 2 Big T's in this town.
Yeah, no. Does he work for you?
He has done some guiding for me. Super guy.
Oh, okay.
Super guy.
All right. Yeah, there was a guide in northern Michigan, Charlie Weaver, maybe, who was a famous guide on the Osable River. And he was a very large man, and you'd see that Osable canoe going by just barely clearing, the water. That water was just 2 inches or so below the top of that Osable canoe. But man, was he a fantastic guide.
Well, I've found that being tall and fat, this is one of the weighting is advantageous. So it's one of the few sports that I found where it's a benefit.
Yeah, is that right? A little extra weight makes you steadier in that stream. Is that how it works?
Oh yeah, I can move through some water. I can move through some water that others can't.
Huh? I hadn't thought of that. Interesting. Well, tell us about North Georgia and fly fishing.
North Georgia actually has a couple thousand miles of trout streams.
Wow.
We are, I guess, food poor would be the best way I can say it, because we don't have a lot of limestone, which leads to the better minerals for the bug life to grow and proliferate in. We tend to have small wild trout. We do have native brook trout that are going to be at your higher elevations, usually on streams where there's a barrier waterfall where the other species haven't come in and taken over. So 2,500 feet and above in elevation, you'll generally find some brook trout. And if you catch something in the 10 to 12 inches, it's certainly a trophy. But some of the most gorgeous little fish, super painted up, beautiful fish out there. But we also have wild rainbows and browns in the area. Again, generally going to be on the smallish side if you find the wild fish, and then numerous stock streams that the public have access to. Okay.
Without giving away your honey holes, what are some of the more well-known streams or some of the places you guide?
The Chattahoochee River runs right through Helen, Georgia. Helen's one of the most visited cities in Georgia. It's got like a Bavarian feel to it. They decided to go with that kind of German type theme. I can't remember how much. It's been 20 or 30. No, more than that. It's probably been 40 years ago. And it's a neat little city. And Chattahoochee runs right through that. And then you can follow the headwaters up the mountain to its source. So you can fish for stock trout in the Chattahoochee right there all the way up for brook trout at the headwaters. And in fact, that goes down, makes Lake Lanier. The Soque River where I am is a tributary of the Chattahoochee.
Okay.
And then you also have the Chattahoochee tailwater below Lake Lanier, which is a fantastic fishery with lots of wild brown trout. The Toccoa River is on the northwest side, and that's a pretty well-known river, tailwater as well. And then as far as smaller streams or other rivers, the Chattooga's up in the area. That's where Deliverance was filmed, one of the prettiest rivers you'll find. the Tallulah River is a good fishery, and then we've got lots of other little creeks to fish. But what you'll find is it's a real diverse river system where with a lot of different looks and different feels.
Okay. How big is the Chattahoochee below the lake where that tailwater is? Is that wadable down there, or do you pretty much have to have a boat?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As long as they're not generating for electricity. Immediately below the dam, geez, I'm going to say that's probably a solid 150 to 200 feet wide through there, and then it slowly skinnies up some, but it's still a big tailwater for a ways.
So you need a boat.
No,
is what you're saying?
No. It's just wide. I can wade up at the dam. You can wade about 1.5 miles before of water, and it's got an island in the area, so you've got two sides of an island that go about 0.5 mile. So a bunch of wadable water there. And then there are other various parks going down that have wadable shoals that pretty big areas. So it definitely can be floated. There are a lot of people that do float it, but also has a lot of wading access.
Interesting. And does that river run then right through Atlanta? Where does that go?
It does. It runs on the outskirts of Atlanta and the city proper. So technically, it's one of, I believe, 3 cities with populations over 5 million that support wild trout. There's a statistic. I'm not sure if that's the exact numbers, but it's pretty interesting. It used to have a lot more reproduction on the lower end, but thermal pollution's kind of kiboshed that with the summer rains and thunderstorms and asphalt. But it's a good solid 20 plus miles of fishable water there.
Okay, so I can catch trout in Atlanta. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Yep. And they do a stocking this time of year. They call it in a delayed harvest area that is actually in town. So you can see the skyline and catch trout.
Oh, that's cool. How about that? All right. Well, let's talk about the Soque River. That's kind of the crown jewel up there, at least from what I read. And what is it that gets you so excited about the Soque? What makes it so special in your mind?
It's one of the few, and the most of the river is private, just for your listeners to know. But it's one of the few areas you can actually go catch big trout in Georgia because of the lack of food sources. It is managed, supplemental feedings in order to get the fish the larger size, but there are lots of options. There's a public section where, of course, there are no gates on the river, so the big fish migrate in between. So the public's got a real good shot at catching a trophy fish through that section, and the numerous areas where you can pay a rod fee to fish with or without a guide, as well as a couple clubs and several subdivisions where the private landowners actually manage the fishery. We actually live in a neighborhood that's got about 1 mile of river that we all take care of.
Okay. Give us a little bit of the history of the stream, because it sort of started off as a club fishery, didn't it? And when did it get to be well known for having big trout? How did all that come about?
It was really more just an average people like to fish kind of thing back 30, 40 years ago, with some stocking in an area and then mostly farms. And it wasn't well taken care of. The cattle tended to be in the river a lot. And in fact, it was on a list of endangered rivers in America, and because of E. coli. And so the Soque Water Rivershed, or I think the Soque River Watershed Association is a nonprofit formed, and really had a lot to do with just educating the farmers on what was going on, because it is a drinking source for the city of Clarksville. And so that was a major change in the water quality. And then one of the landowners that owns an area called Brigadoon Lodge, they started actually stocking and supplementally feeding fish there. And this was kind of during the .com boom era, where there was a lot of wealth being created. And so people were willing to pay a good bit of money to come fish for the trophy trout. And that concept just kind of spread throughout the river to where today it's pretty much 20 miles of managed water.
Ah, interesting. So if I invested in a .com that went bust in 2021, they might have been fishing up on the Soque River. Is that what you're telling me?
They may have been fishing in the 80s on the Soque. Yes.
Oh, in the 80s. Okay, not in the 2000. All right, because I'm thinking that .com bust was back in 2001 or something.
Maybe I'm a little bit early, but it was in the computer technology boom era, I guess.
I got you. There's a couple other clubs up there, right, where you can, get a rod fee and go on out there. What are some of the other clubs?
There are the Black Hawk is above that, and then there are Dragonfly is one down on near where we are. Fern Valley, which is where I take most of my clients. They have a property behind their house with about a half-mile stretch, and then they manage another half-mile they call the meadow, which is really just about a quarter-mile downstream, but it's more in a pasture situation, tree line, but it's just got a totally different look to it. So there's probably 8 or 9 along the river. There are some private clubs as well where you pay a annual fee to be part of a limited number of people that can fish in the area.
Okay.
My understanding, I'm not real familiar with it, is it's a kind of thing where it's not you've got to know somebody in order to get in there. Very few people come in and out of it, and if somebody does and there's an opening, it's going to be one of the existing members' friends probably that's waiting in line.
Oh, I see. And I'm curious, so there's like 1 mile of public water there then, huh? Does that get hammered pretty hard?
It does. It gets hit pretty hard in, I would say, the warmer months. This time of year, you can go up and definitely fish it and not and have room. I would say our area, a lot of the locals who have a tendency to fish it are also hunters. So they're usually deer hunting this time of year. So you've got a lot better shot of and this is a better time for the bigger fish to be migrating through there too. So it's not stocked this time of year by the state. They do that more in the, for whatever reason, in the warmer months of the year here in Georgia. We were a seasonal state where we had a trout season from the end of March to the end of October. But they changed that and went year-round because they found that humans don't have a huge impact on the wild trout populations. It's really weather-related.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think they closed the Smoky Mountains down completely to the park down to fishing completely for numerous years, and then opened up about 5 streams. And they did samples for several years comparing those 5 streams to 5 that were still closed. And they found that the populations mirrored each other. They went up and down, but it was all based on weather conditions and not man's influence on the fishing. But we did not change our stocking schedule, even though we went year-round. So we still stock in July and August and September, and don't in November, December, January, which I'd like to see change, but I don't know how. I don't think Big T has the influence to do that.
Yeah, come on now. Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking Trout Routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories, and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. There's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. So are they putting, big fish in there, 18, 20 inchers, or are you guys actually feeding and raising these fish to get them into I don't know, how big do they get?
A combination of both would be the answer to that. It depends on, because we all kind of manage things independently. If you're running a pay to fish operation, you're probably going to stock a little bit bigger fish, maybe in the 12 to 16 inch range, and grow them and have a holdover population of 20 to 30 inch fish. For like us in my neighborhood, it's just more economical for me to stock 7 to 9 inch fish and then do that annually and grow them ourselves. But pretty much everybody that's along the river does supplemental feeding.
Okay. And do these fish, I imagine they move around quite a bit, don't they?
They do.
So you put them in your spot, and the next thing you know, they're up at Brigadoon or wherever the other places are.
Kind of what I've figured out over time is if I put 100 rainbows in our stretch of river, we're probably going to have 60 to 70 next year. If I put 100 brown trout, we may have 10. And if you put 100 brook trout, you're lucky if you have one left. They just move.
They move or they die?
They move. They move north, and they're a little bit more fragile to me and don't handle the summer heat nearly as well. I think the browns tend to get real territorial.
Yeah.
So if you have a hole, there's going to be a brown or two that dominate it. So when the new guys are stocked, they get run off. And they end up somewhere. But it's, in my experience, if you're spending your money, you probably want to stock more rainbows. We do have a lot of brown trout. They're just, it's not nearly as numerous.
Do the rainbows grow faster?
They do.
Okay. And they stick around. And are they as territorial as a brown trout?
No, not nearly.
Okay.
Not nearly. So you'll find a hole with a 50 to 80 large rainbows in it, whereas there may only be a couple brown trout.
Oh, wow. While we're on that subject, how do you approach a hole with 50 to 80 large rainbows? I mean, when you catch the first one, does he run all through the pack and they're all gone, or how does that work?
It depends on their mood. There are times when, they just shut everything down and you've got to let it settle back down, which generally takes 15, 20 minutes. They get fairly acclimated to, I'm not going to say they don't spook with human activity, because they absolutely do.
Right.
But they tend to settle back in relatively quickly. There are other times where that activity excites them, and they'll actually feed more aggressively once there's some activity going on for a short period of time.
Okay.
But it's hit or miss which one's going to happen.
Right.
So one of the challenges is they're not nearly as, when they get spooked, they don't necessarily flee, because they're large and they know it. They're not as wary. They're wary of predators, but they're not going to necessarily move away from you and run up river 30 feet like a small little wild rainbow in a stream would. But when they recognize that you're there, they're not going to open their mouth.
Yeah, they shut
So
down.
it's a false sense of security you can get lulled into if you're fishing up and they didn't move, thinking, okay, I'm safe here, because they will clam down and you can get real frustrated when it's low and clear and you can see all the fish and you can watch them just absolutely ignore every offering that you give them.
That's got to be, especially for, I'll call it, those plodding fishermen. I mean, I've got a few friends that fish kind of slowly. That's just what they like to do, and I imagine it would be really tempting just to, I see them, they're right there. Just keep pounding away. And it's like, you're not going to catch those guys. Move on.
Yeah, and that's the tempting thing to do. And we actually get a lot of people that are really inexperienced or first timers. I would say 50% of our clientele that we guide have very little or no experience whatsoever. So they're sitting there staring. I want to fish this big hole that I see right here that I can see 100 fish sitting in. And you're like, no, we want to go to the fast water where you can't see any because they can't see you, and they don't have time to make a decision like they do up here.
Okay. So it's a little tougher to catch them in that slower, deeper hole than it is in the fast
Typically,
water,
yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just got more time to look at the cheeseburgers that's floating by, I guess.
Exactly. That's why we like our rain here, on occasion, just enough to put a little stain on the water.
Little stain. Yeah, I got you. But maybe not 2.5 inches, huh?
Not 2.5. That's chocolate milk at that point.
Yeah, right. You can go out and plow the river on days like that.
Yeah.
All right. So did I ask you, how big do these guys get? Like what's your personal best in the Soque?
30.5 inches would be the biggest
Oh my
rainbow,
gosh.
and 29.5 inch brown.
Really?
Yeah. It's not uncommon to catch something over 25 fairly regularly.
Wow.
Certainly, if you're going on a guided trip, most of the time you're going to catch a fish over 20.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, do these new anglers realize like this is
No.
incredible? They have no idea, do they?
No, it's totally spoiling them. It's ruining them completely.
Yeah. And then they go out west and, the guide's like, oh, you caught 12 fish that are in the 14 to 16 inch range. You had a good day. And they're like, well, where's my 20 incher?
Anywhere else in Georgia, you would be thrilled to catch 14 to 16 inch fish. Most of ours,
Right.
we call them snits, standard 9-inch trout, because that's generally what they stock.
Snits?
And your wild fish aren't getting any bigger. So, yeah, you catch stuff in the teens and you get real excited down here generally.
Yeah, I'll say.
I will mention one other river while I'm thinking of it, if you don't mind.
Sure.
That's a real gem that people should try and experience if they come here, and it's Duke's Creek. We have a state park called Smithgall Woods, and the Smithgalls that donated the land did it with a stipulation that it be managed for trophy trout. So it's got about a 5-mile stretch of river that is supplementally fed, and the public can go fish it for free, as long as they have a reservation. And it's only open to anglers Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, about October through June. And they allow 15 anglers at a time. But if you call the state park and make a reservation, you can go there and fish for free.
Ah, cool.
And a lot of the fish are wild fish that are just supplementally fed and growed up.
Great tip.
So real pretty fish that are just supplementally fed wild fish. We've got a good population on the Soque of wild fish, especially the further upriver you go. It's just difficult to tell at times which ones are stocked or which ones are wild. But you'll definitely catch the 3 and 4 inch fish with bar marks that are wild, and you'll catch an 18-inch fish that hits a dry fly that's sitting in a riffle and fights like crazy, that's got clean fins and everything looks right. So you're like, that's probably a wild guy that grew up.
Nice. Hey anglers, are you looking for a darn near perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Then do yourself a favor and check out anglerscoffee.com. That's right, Anglers Coffee is made by anglers for anglers, delivered to your doorstep, one batch at a time. They start with the very best coffee beans selected for their great flavor and responsible growing methods. Then each batch is roasted fresh daily. The result is a wide selection of roast styles that will satisfy the most discerning coffee lover. And now you can enjoy Angler's Coffee anywhere, anytime with the dry dropper single-serving coffee in a tea bag. Just add water. And this isn't your mother's instant coffee. It's a single serving of carefully dark roasted, fresh ground and nitro-sealed coffee. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So head on over to anglerscoffee.com to check out their great selection of coffee and the organizations they support. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. That's Angler's Coffee. It's darn near perfect. give us a sense, if you could, of, like the character of the water. Like what are the flows? How wide is it? What's the gradient like? What kinds of water are we going to run into? You have riffles, runs, and pools. What's all that look like?
You start, it originates at about 4,500 feet up on Tray Mountain in the Chattahoochee National Forest. And it's got two prongs that come down, the West Fork and the East Fork. They kind of combine to make the Soque and Batesville. And really kind of that area is where you start getting access that would not be a residential type situation where you could actually start fishing. So up in that area, you've got about a 20-foot width to the stream. It's going to be a little more gradient than the lower section, but it's still not going to be steep plunge pool type stuff. It's going to be more riffle run pools with a little higher gradient than as you come down further. As you come down further, it just widens a little bit more as more creeks come in. It is got a lot of springs that feed it as well.
Okay.
But mostly riffle run pool, and I would say even more in the runs and pools with some riffles mixed in. You've got some exposed bedrock floor in addition to gravel. So there's going to be a mix of both of those. And then as you get further down, you start getting some more siltation and sand introduced into those areas. Okay,
a little slower. What are the what are the flows typically in these different sections, would you say?
You're going to run 150. We got below 100 cubic feet per second with the drought, but average in the dry fall, I'd say October, November is probably going to be a 135 to 150 cubic feet per second range.
Okay.
December is one of our second wettest months, so we start to go up from there, and we may be in the 200s, some on average. But generally, we'll fish it easily up to 350. So you've got a pretty good leeway as far as how you can weight it. If we get it blown out, like the 2.5 inches of rain, it'll be fishable probably tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, okay. So it handles the rain.
Yeah, it handles the rain pretty well when we've been when we get really wet, and it'll stay up for a little bit longer, but it drains fairly rapidly.
Nice. So the Soque flows through. It's all private property. You're up in the mountains, though, right? So I'm just trying to understand, what does it look like up there? Are you fishing in heavily wooded areas, or are there some open areas? What's it look like?
Yeah, it's going to have we've got a lot of mountain laurel and rhododendron, a lot of hemlocks. We've been fighting the woolly algae. I don't know if you're probably not familiar with that, but our hemlocks in the southeast have been attacked by a invasive species. It's pretty much wiping them out because they don't have any predation. But you can inoculate the trees, and because a lot of the stuff's private, people are taking care of the hemlocks, and actually, which is one, I guess, benefit of being some private areas, is the people are paying the money themselves to take care of them and
take care of it,
keep that from killing everywhere here.
Yeah, it sounds pretty.
But yeah, it's got a real mountain feel to it through most of it. As you get to the lower section, it's about a 30-mile river before it dumps into the Chattahoochee. The first 20 are more mountainous. The last 10 become more pasturey, would be, I guess, the best way I could describe it.
Okay, a little slower. And you've taken some fairly famous folks fishing through the years, haven't you? Can you share a story or two about that?
I guess the most famous group that we've had that came up annually was the President Carter group. He would bring a group of the donors to the Carter Association, or Carter Foundation, I guess it is, rather. So it was real neat being able to work with him and Rosalind, and they had a history coming up for years. I worked with them a couple years, I guess, when he was in about 92 and 93. He was still out there fishing, and I have, I guess I'm probably one of the few people who can say I carried a president's wife down the bank into the river. We were at Fern Valley, where we were located. There's a nice hole up top, and I believe President Carter may have even high-holed her and decided he was going to fish that area. So
it said, Rosalind, go somewhere else, huh?
we were trying to figure out a place to take Rosalind and get her in, and it was a steep bank that had a ladder, and it wasn't going to work for a 92-year-old first lady. So we, four of us, were able to carry her down safely into the water.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there, guide there, and I'm thinking, I don't know what she weighed at the time. I know it wasn't more than 100 pounds, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, left hand real close to her wading belt, and sure enough, she hooks in about a 24-inch rainbow. I had to reach over and hold that thing. I think it was going to drag her in with it. So, but they both really avid fishers. Both could cast beautifully. It was really neat to see.
Yeah, I've had a couple other guests who've talked about fishing with Jimmy Carter, and that he's a darn. I've heard Rosalind is actually better in some ways than he is.
Oh yeah,
well, that's great.
If you ask any guide, especially with new people, any guide down here, there's a group of women over here that never fly fished in their life, and here's a handful of men that have fished before. Which guys do you want? And you're taking the women every time, because they listen to you.
Yeah, is that right?
They don't have an ego. They listen to you. They do, and they catch fish.
They do what you tell them to do.
The male by about the third cast says, "No, I got this. I got it.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, go over there.
I'm good.
Yeah, help that other guy.
Let me see how far I can cast."
Yeah, that's helpful. What are some of the more annoying things that you've had customers say or do over the years?
I really haven't had a whole lot of annoying customers.
That's good to hear.
I think most people are really respectful and try. The ones that are not into it, where maybe it's a child that the family brought along who really isn't into fishing and he has to be there, can be a challenge. And then sometimes the guys that hit the bottle first thing in the morning. I've had a situation there where they were good anglers actually, but that just the inhibitions went away, and the let me see how tight I can try and cast this fly into this small area started happening. And when it was unsuccessful and you started hanging my flies in the tree repeatedly, it gets frustrating, but you just got to kind of grin and bear it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Bring the fly rod or bring the whiskey, but not both at the same time.
I don't mind you bringing the whiskey. Just don't start at 8 a.m.
Yeah. Right. Oh my gosh. Now, all right, so you mentioned you played college basketball. I know you graduated with honors, and then you were in the mortgage industry for a long time, right? How did you go from banking to fly fishing?
Well, I had transitioned into a wholesale position in the mortgage industry and really was thriving. And then in 2008, the implosion happened.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just really difficult to find another job. And the company I'd been with strategically laid people off over time, and they were basing the income on your prior 6 months earnings, and I had done real well, so I was just kind of hanging on. And then the recession got worse and the employment situation got worse. They changed the way they compensated people that were being laid off to very little money. So I kind of hung on for no reason. And the employment situation just continued to get worse. So,
okay.
As I looked around for another job, I found the insurance field. I was able to take one of the tests that told you, what career field would be appropriate for you. And insurance and chef were the top two.
Not fly fishing?
Not fly fishing. But I do love to cook.
Yeah.
So I was convinced, hey, this test must be onto something. I just knew I couldn't uh, be with my family and be a chef and do all that. I wasn't going to go through all that. So I chose the insurance field, which, as a lot of people know, in the sales capacity, it takes a long time to ramp up your business to where you're making a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
Well, I found trout fishing at the same time, and it was a flexible job. So I'd get up early, I'd do my work and take my lunch on the river and then go back to work. And about the time that I was going to kind of start making a little bit of money, I looked and said, I can be a fishing guide and make this much money tomorrow. And this is where my passion is. And
Yeah.
it's really where I felt like the Lord was directing me. So I made the plunge and started guiding and started my online fly shop at the same time, because I did have a business background and a commercial lending background and banked small businesses right out of college. So I had a decent grasp on business, and I knew it at my age I was not going to be able to scale the guiding business to the point where I could make as much money as I would like. And I knew physically at my age I wasn't going to be able to bang out 250 trips a year for
That's a
a
lot.
very long period of time. So we started the online business at the same time.
And that's still going, right?
Still going. Yep. Yep. The online business grew that, and it got to the point where I felt like I was limited on some of the products I could carry, because a lot of people require that you have brick and mortar. So we opened up the physical fly shop here in Clarksville so that I could have access to a broader range of products, and it gave me the
Okay.
ability to get back in front of people again, and instead of just sitting in your at home online shop, not interacting with folks. So it's been good.
Well, how did you end up saying, hey, I'm going to pick up a fly rod and give that a shot? Sounds like you fished the Chattahoochee quite a bit.
Yeah, I'd lived in Atlanta all my life and crossed it numerous times. I had gotten really good at drinking beer, probably one of the top beer drinkers in the world at the time. And 30 beers a day really wasn't real good for your lifestyle, and your wife really wasn't real happy with that either. So I'd always had a drinking problem if I look back, even through college, but very functional. And so when the mortgage industry imploded, it just kind of magnified, especially with the frustration of not being able to find employment that I felt was an income commensurate with my life and experience and college education and everything else. So, one day I finally had enough, and had a talk with come to Jesus meeting
Heck
with
yeah.
God, and basically said I can't do this anymore. And so I went from really drinking about 30 beers a day and smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes to cold turkey in both of them. And so once I did that, I had to find something to do with my addictive personality. And when I crossed the Chattahoochee one day and saw a guy fishing from a kayak, I said, "Hey, that's right around the corner from me." I grabbed a spinning rod at Bass Pro Shops, went down with a Meps and caught a trout on my third cast, and was like, "Wow, this is really cool." Just from the bank. And then remembered I had a fly rod in the basement that I fished for bass and brim with poppers a lot. And once I grabbed that thing and started catching trout on that, it was done.
No kidding. Wow. Well, you've been on a bumpy road, but it sounds like you come out the end pretty good.
But I think this sport's done that for numerous people. I work with the Project Healing Waters group.
Oh,
So they
good.
come in and tie flies and in the shop, and there's numerous organizations that cater to people that have recovered from one thing or the other, and fly fishing has been the avenue for it. So it's just, it's a phenomenal sport when it comes to
Right.
helping people through things.
Well, I'm excited to announce something new on the Destination Angler podcast called Doing Good. In this 1-minute segment, you'll hear about great organizations around the country who are doing good for the world through angling. And today we have an organization called Alter Fly Fishing. Alter Fly Fishing merges faith and fly fishing into a common stream by hosting life-impacting fly fishing retreats and outdoor adventures for men, women, and high-capacity leaders, pastors, and special ops military personnel. Their unique approach provides great fishing experiences around the country, as well as helping people thrive in life and impact others. This year, Alter Fly Fishing will host a special charity fishing trip called Tres Amigos. And get this, angling legends Landon Mayer, Ed Engel, and Jason Randall will be teaming up to provide a fly fishing experience like never before on private waters in Colorado. Each day, participants will have private instruction and fish alongside each of these masters to hone their techniques and skills. Evenings will be filled with teaching, stories, great food, and a lot of laughter. Proceeds from this charity trip will go to fund future Alter retreats for active duty special ops military personnel and pastors in burnout. To learn more about Alter Fly Fishing, explore trip opportunities, or to plan a trip for your group, visit alterflyfishing.org. That's ALTAR flyfishing.org. And you can certainly be kind of, like you said, from one addiction to another, you can really be all in on fly fishing. There's so much to learn and so many places to go. And, you just kind of never, I feel like you just never tire of it. You're always learning something new.
That's the thing. There's a really an unlimited, as much as I feel like I know, there's 5 times as much that I understand that I don't.
Wow.
And I think sometimes you go through that period, and this is probably true of kids too, right? You've got the 13-year-old who knows it all. I think I probably was a 13-year-old fly fisherman who thought I knew it all. But the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because we got exposed to it. I went from really never having trout fish with a fly rod to being a competitive angler fishing in a U.S. men's regional in about 5 years. But
that's amazing.
I can tell you the amount of hours that I put in to get from one point to the other was immense. We as guides always laugh at the older gentleman who comes for the guide trip that tells you he's been fishing for 30 years. Well, once a year out on your trip out west of Montana isn't 30 years of experience necessarily.
Yeah, where do you start? Yeah, you probably got more fishing in a half a year than that guy has in his lifetime.
In 30, yeah. So, but yeah, I put a lot of work in and enjoyed every minute of it. So it's been good.
Tell me about competition angling. Huh? What's that all about?
The Southeast actually has produced a lot of good anglers because I think we've got some challenging conditions here. But it's, in essence, you've got, and it's been going on internationally for forever. It's become more popular in the U.S., but it's still kind of a small niche. And because it's a small niche, if you fish in one of the competitions here, you're likely to be fishing against somebody that is on our national team or certainly on the youth team. So it's really top anglers. But we will section off the river into what we call beats. There's sections that we think have about the equivalent amount of fish. And you get to fish that section for a set amount of time, usually around 2 hours. And you get points for your fish, basically a certain number of points per fish you catch, and then more points per centimeter. We measure them and release them immediately. And then you get placed based on the people that are in your flight. You get ranked 1 through however many in your flight, and you want to end up with the least amount of points. If I finish first, I get a 1. If that happens, usually we fish a morning and an afternoon session. Sometimes it's 1 day, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. But it's a neat thing, and the learning, your learning curve will go straight up if you try it out.
Okay. And is it mostly Euro nymphing that you're doing, or what styles of fishing?
No, now most of us use a Euro nymphing setup, but if you're not throwing a dry dropper and working a streamer during the course of your certain rivers really are conducive to Euro nymphing, but a lot of the stuff we fish, you need to be real versatile. And that's one thing that it'll teach you. It'll teach you versatility and change is necessary to be
Yeah.
successful. What happens is your eyes get opened up to I think a lot of anglers, everyday angler, goes and fishes with his buddies, and he may be the guy that catches 10 fish consistently, and his buddies are catching 3 and 4, and he is the man. But and this was me. I was the man at Buford Dam. I thought I had it dialed in. And then I fished in a competition, and I realized real quickly this little kid on Team USA who's 17 years old, who I could pick up and toss across the river, just walked in right behind when I fished it and caught 8 fish and caught 24 in 2 hours. And
Oh
he's
my
never
gosh.
fished this river before. It's like, what the heck?
So what is that kid doing? I mean, what was that kid doing?
Really humbling. And so doing that started teaching me, okay, there's a whole nother level out here on how many fish you can catch. And first of all, not every person is out to catch every fish they can catch. So it's not for everybody. And I'm not that way at times. At first I was. Now it might be, hey, I want to just go throw a dry fly, even though I know I'm not going to catch more than 1 or 2 fish down here doing it.
Because it's fun. Yeah.
But it did open your eyes to the possibilities and the numbers of fish that can be caught. And it also taught me, you need to start changing things up if you're not catching fish. There's rarely a time that we can truly say they just weren't biting at all today.
Yeah.
Trout live on a treadmill and they eat breadcrumbs. They're burning calories and their meals are tiny. They've got to eat. So it's more likely that you didn't figure it out that day. And when you can get that in your brain, you know you got to start changing when you're not catching fish to try and figure out what it is that they want.
Are you talking about changing what exactly? Changing your entire approach, going from Euro to dry dropper, changing flies, tippets, all of the above?
Flies, technique, everything, tippet size. What's the combination? What are they looking for? And you need to become good at tying knots.
Yeah.
That's a key because that prohibits so many people from changing. So if you're watching TV, sit there and tie knots. Get good at it. Being able to change flies in a real short period of time makes it so easy to think about doing it and not being like, oh God. And I can relate. I'm 50. I'm going on 55, and my eyes the last 5 years have really started to go. And I've fought not wearing cheaters, but it's time. Do what you need to do to be able to see correctly, so that you can change. We'll change 2 flies in a matter of 30 seconds. And when you can do things that quickly, it just makes it a lot easier to be able to make the changes you need.
Okay, so give me a scenario. Like, how does this actually play out? You come to a stretch of water. You're maybe it's in a competition, maybe not. How do you kind of size up the water and figure out what you're going to start with?
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and figure out, well, I'm going to look at the seasonality. What time of year is it? Springtime down here, we can get away with 14s and 16s. You're going to have more fish in the middle of the water column, upper water column, because you got more bug activity. I'm more likely to be able to catch fish on naturals, on the hare's ear, pheasant tail combinations, the things like that. Summertime, it's going to be warm, it's going to be slower, they're going to be a little bit lazier typically. The bugs actually get smaller typically here at that time of year. Might have to be stealthier. Winter time, it tends to be egg time down here, like a lot of places. Slower stuff, deeper pools, slower water. So I'm going to analyze seasonality. I'm going to analyze whether I've got stocked or wild fish, because I typically I'm going to approach them a little bit differently. And when I say stocked, I'm going to mean more recently stocked versus holdover fish, because holdover fish tend to act more like the wild fish. We'll look at the water conditions, clarity, temperature, flow. All those things are going to factor in to the decisions that I make. And then you generally make progressions. If I feel like natural fly should be working and they're not, then I'm going to downsize. That's going to be one of the progressions that I'm going to make.
Okay.
If it's clearer water, I'm going to start moving my tippet size down, typically, if I'm not having success. But I'm also, okay, these bugs aren't working. I'm going to throw a streamer on real quick, see if that works.
Experiment.
Sometimes you can just sense that they are not holding on to flies long at all. And if I have any direct connection via Euro nymphing, they don't like it, and I'll go to a dry dropper. And I might have more success that way because it's suspension nymphing. It's something they don't feel that tension of immediately when they eat the fly. So we pick up on a lot of things, and you pattern the fish like the bass angler does. If I find that the fish might be eating some in different areas, but eating a lot in one particular area, tail out of pools, the head of a run, and you pick up on that and start really targeting that water.
That type of water, or that specific spot?
Yeah, that type of water. And I'll fish everything, but I'm really going to focus on, hey, they're really eating at the heads of these runs. I'm going to really make sure I hammer those areas.
Huh, interesting. Okay.
I get pretty technical on things. I've got friends. I fish with Gordon Vanderpool. He coaches the youth Southeast youth team, and he's one of the best anglers I've ever fished with, and who taught me a lot of what I know. He picks up on so many little details that you're just like, you know what? I don't want to think that hard. We'll fish one day, and I'll pick up, hey, they're eating eggs, maybe quicker than him, but he'll pick up, they're eating eggs, but they're eating it on the descent more than the rest of the drift. So I'm going to shorten my drifts up and get more descent in my cast. I'm like, okay, that's a layer too. That's a layer too far for me.
Let's say you're fishing a run. How many times you put the fly through the run if you don't get some, like when you change flies?
If I'm getting good drifts and I know there are fish there, I'm going to make 4 or 5, but that's probably it may be a few more than that, because I may change depths of the drift to cover the water column, but not a ton. If I feel like I'm getting good drifts, every drift is really going to be different, period.
Yeah.
If you really watch, because of the way the water swirls and the microcurrents and everything else, and I think all of us that have fished for a while, you can sense, ooh, that's the one, right? You hit the seam 4 times, but you finally catch it where it gets down to the right area, and you just kind of feel this is the one. And as a guide, you can call it. You'll sit there and tell a client, you're going to get eaten this time. And a lot of times you're right, because you just know it hit right. So you've got to, you can't just do 1 or 2. But you also don't want to sit there and just bang the same fly through constantly.
So you knock off that fly, put on another one. If you get a bunch of good drifts, you put on another fly.
You can always go back to that. That's something I have to remind myself. Sometimes I feel like if I take the fly off, I have to retire it for a day. You can put it back on.
It's a good point.
So it's okay to change and go back to it if you think maybe that was the right one.
Well, maybe it would that wrong fly that you tried work good in a different part of the river.
Absolutely.
Different type of water.
Absolutely. The Soque is one of those rivers. I can tell you this right now. So I live on the river about a half a mile from where I was the head guide for a long time. And when we moved here, I was like, this is great. If I have an afternoon trip, I can walk in the backyard, figure out what they're eating. I'll know immediately when I get down there. Didn't work once. I'd catch fish on pheasant tails here. They wouldn't touch them down there.
Really?
And it's a half a mile away. So yeah, we don't have the hatches and the consistent bug life that you get in other areas of the country. So it could be real hit or miss. And I'm not saying they don't dial into things, because they do, but it could be a real guessing game from place to place, and even section to section. You may do real well in a pool on a certain fly, but you move upstream 200 yards to a run and they're eating something else.
Right.
And that's why I think the competitive angling stuff has helped, and why a lot of my guides have done competitive angling and are successful guides, because
Make you better.
they change. Change is the thing.
All right, now talk to me about targeting and fighting and landing big fish. It's a whole nother game, isn't it?
It is a whole nother game, and that's probably one of the big challenges guiding here, is because you got to teach people how to fly fish and land big fish at the same time. I think sometimes some of the mistakes people make is they overgun themselves or over equip, meaning, oh, I'm catching 10-pound trout, I need a 7-weight.
Oh, go.
No, the 7-weight's not going to protect the tippet. You're going to break fish off constantly. Rarely do we fish 3X. I mean, if it's chocolatey or you really generally are fishing 4X a lot, 5X when it's clear, and sometimes we have to drop to 6. And so you're really walking a fine line when you're talking about trout that are in the 16 to 30 inch range. So we fish a lot of 9-foot 5 weights with clients, and then when we do anything Euro nipping related, it's a 3-weight or a 2-weight sometimes.
Yeah.
And some guides have gone to the Euro setup or rod, but fish an indicator with it, because you get that soft tip and tippet protection. It's not a bad setup at all. So that's one thing people make the mistake of doing. I think the big key is to avoid getting your rod pointed at a fish at any time, because they make these hard charges and runs. You feel like you've got to give more than just the drag. And so people will start, when they pull hard, start to let that rod tip get pointed at the fish. And that's the biggest no-no. If you can maintain a 90-degree angle between the butt of your rod and your leader at all times, you're a lot better off. Now, what I do to compensate is, instead of letting that rod tip move forward, I'll start pushing my arm out towards the fish and lunge. I'll actually lunge towards the fish when they make that hard charge, push my arm out, and then get back into position. Since I played college basketball, I'm big on positioning.
Yeah, right. I could see.
Right. There's a stance. When I fish, I have a stance. I have a fish fighting stance. I square up to the fish.
Mm-hmm.
If I get out of position, I get back to a base position quickly. I call it the oh crap position. And that's where the fish is coming at you and you're real fast, and it goes above your hands are above your head. Well, I see people go there a lot, but you don't want to stay there. That's your backup. Yeah. That's your oh crap position. So I'm big about, hey, I'm out of position. I got to real fast and get back down to where I'm back into position, so that I can go back to my oh crap position if I have to get there. Because once you're in the oh crap position, you can't go so there's no secondary oh crap position. So I'm big about, trying to have a technique. There's a method. There are fundamentals to fighting the fish, and we go through all that when we guide folks.
Okay.
Side pressure is huge.
Side pressure?
Yeah.
And what's that do?
Keeping that rod low, parallel to the river. When the fish is below you, you've got that 90-degree bend, and you can transition it to the other side when it runs above you. That tends to keep that fish. I don't like running after fish. I rarely run after a fish. If you give them good side pressure, it'll encourage them to come back into your playing field in front of you. It also tends to keep the fish lower in the water column where the water tends to be slower.
When do people lose fish? Is it when they make a hard run, when they're jumping, or they rub you off on something, or?
A lot of times it's jumping. A lot of times these fish know their territory. And so if they've escaped with a certain technique, you'll see the techniques they use. One's the digger. He'll just start rubbing his head on the bottom, just swimming around, rubbing his head on the bottom, trying to get that fly out. Some of them that are in the rocky areas know their rock, and they'll actually run behind, constantly try and run behind and get your tippet rubbed against the rock. Then there's the log guy. Hey, I know that this log is here. I run straight to the log. I run underneath it. Then I run back upstream. Works every time.
Works every time.
There's the the overhanging mountain laurel guy. You hook him and he runs straight to the bank and jumps up into the mountain laurel, and you're toast.
That happens, huh?
There was a brown, the 29.5-inch brown that I caught was a lot down for me. It was the 6th time I hooked him that I landed him.
Wow. And he was a mountain laurel guy?
He knew the trees over on the bank were there and knew how to use them. And so every time, and they're too big to just say, well, I'll just hammer down. I'll just stop him from going to the bank. If they want to go somewhere, they're going to go, or they're going to break your tippet off if you try and stop. So you've got to give them room and hope that they don't do something like that. But yeah, 5 times, you just cry because it was a beautiful fish and I wanted to see it so bad. But finally he made a mistake and didn't do it one time.
You got him. Nice. You got a picture of that?
Oh yeah, I've got a picture.
Yeah, send me that picture. People want to see that one.
I don't think I sent you that one. Unfortunately, it's probably, you know how it is when you're by yourself. It's one of the ones where the lighting's just terrible or something,
Yeah, hard to get a good picture.
I typically took pretty good pictures as a guide because I'd take enough of them where eventually one of them,
I'll bet.
one of these has got to be good.
Oh my gosh. Big T, what are your top confidence flies? I imagine that varies by the season, but what do you want to have in that box when you head out there?
If I had to just pick a box that I could take anywhere, I'd have a Pat's rubber legs. I'd have a squirmy worm. I'd have an egg. I'd have a zebra midge. I'd have a Frenchie or pheasant tail, a hare's ear or waltz worm. And I think that would be would cover just about everything, and probably a zebra midge.
Okay.
I think if I carried those around, I could probably catch fish just about anywhere.
What any dry flies?
Not here.
No kidding.
Not a confidence fly. Not what I would call a confidence fly.
Okay. When do you bust the dry flies out? Only if you see one fish feeding? You targeting that fish, or?
My dry fly fishing is generally more using it as an indicator, and I'll catch fish on it.
Yeah.
But it's not real common that we get the kind of hatches where, oh, look, the caddis are coming off and the fish are rising everywhere. You'd get it down at Buford Dam with midge hatches and throw little size 20 Griffith gnats. And there'd be days you could just target them every ripple and pick up all these little wild browns. It's great. That happens occasionally. There are times, but it's so rare that happens. It's more, I want a suspension nymph. I like to dry drop because it's softer than throwing an indicator. And I got the shot at catching a fish. And there are days you might pick up 5 or 6 fish doing it. But I had a rare day where I exclusively with a client, we went just straight dry fly fishing. It was wonderful. But literally, I've had a day where we did that.
Okay.
So it's mostly subsurface for us here. But, 90% of the fish feeding anywhere is subsurface.
Right.
You still can catch, even though out west somebody's just hammering them on dry flies, you still probably could catch more if you were nymphing.
Probably could. What's your setup then? You dry drop, or you just allow 2 flies in Georgia? What's the rule there?
No, we can go to, I don't know that we have a limit to be honest. But generally, I do some, and especially on the tailwater, I would drop 2 midges below a dry often. So I'd fish 3 there. You got to be careful. That can be a train wreck if you're not careful. But I learned, since my casting is not extremely fundamental and I don't have the tight, you do not want a tight loop when you're throwing a dry and 2 droppers.
Yeah.
But generally, it's just a dry and a single dropper, and that dropper may range anywhere from 12 to 36 inches.
Okay. Going back to the zebra midges, what size are those zebras typically?
If you're fishing the Chattahoochee tailwater, anywhere from 18 to 20 is going to be your most typical day. Times you may have to drop down to 24, 26, but that's rare.
How about on the Soque?
Soque, actually, what's funny is I'm the guy who grew up midge fishing. I'm the guy whose first flies he tied were 18s and 20s.
Yeah.
And yet up here, I struggle to catch fish on small bugs. And I've got friends that go out there all day long and catch fish on size 20s. So I don't know why I don't have as much luck with them, but I don't here. But a lot of the guys do real well on 18s and 20s and on midges up here.
How about that?
I need to fish them and I'm a true believer in confidence. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no logical sense that having confidence in a fly would matter. But I'm a true believer. I remember fishing one day. I had a stonefly pattern that I had tied that was working real well. And my friend had a midge pattern that he tied that was working really well. And so we each gave each other a fly and we tied tandem rigs, 2 flies. We both had our fly and the other person's fly on. Same setup. I caught 80% of the fish on my fly. He caught 80% of his fish on his fly.
That's kind of crazy.
Same thing, but it's just a confidence thing.
I don't know what it is, but I wonder, do you concentrate better? Do you just make better decisions as you're fishing? I don't know.
I don't know, especially when I got one of each on it at the same time. It just blew my mind that happened. But I didn't have confidence in patch rubber legs or girdle bugs for a long time. And then one day I hammered fish on them, and ever since that's like one of my top. I'm going to have this in the box for sure.
I mean, do you find those bigger trout are looking for a bigger chunk of meat?
A lot of times, yeah. And we've got good stonefly, and I never pronounce right, Helgramite populations in the river. So we do have that is a very prevalent fly just about year round here. So, but there are times we've got a fly that the guy who started our competitive fly fishing team, Ben, came up with called the Brain. And it's really kind of a Y2K on steroids. Really big, gaudy. You wouldn't think there'd be a reason in the world a trout would eat it, and yet sometimes these big fish just go crazy for it.
Yeah, go figure. You got to send me a picture of that one, Big T. And I'm curious if I'm coming out there with my family, for instance, is there a lot to do in the area?
I'm kind of a homebody, so I'm not probably the best guy to ask about all the wanderings around. But North Georgia has a lot of. Well, first of all, Atlanta's an hour and 15 minutes away. Downtown's more like an hour and a half. So you're real close to whatever you want to do down there. But if you do stay up in the mountain area, there are a lot of little bed and breakfasts. There's a lot of little inns.
Yeah,
a lot of little towns have, like Helen, Georgia has a little roller coaster. It's nothing like a Dolly World or anything like that, but zip lines. There's horseback riding. A lot of hiking. There are a lot of waterfalls you can go see. You can do little gem mining expeditions, pan for gold. I think we talked about Dahlonega at one point. One of the first gold rushes was in that area. So yeah, there's a lot of little towns that have their fall festivals, and they're different festivals, different times of the years, where there's a lot of crafts and a lot of people watching kind of things to do.
Okay. Do you have a lot of nice restaurants and watering holes for the hungry, thirsty angler at the end of the day?
Absolutely.
What are your favorites?
The Copper Pot in Clarksville is a nice little restaurant. It's got outdoor seating. The Attic is another neat little place here. And then there's the places that you gotta be here to know. Mamadar's Pizza, which you would drive by 100 times and not even know it's a pizza place, but it's takeout only, and it's got some of the best pizza in the world.
Wow.
And they're only open they're only open Wednesday through Sunday from 4 to 8, and it's just takeout, little drive-through place.
You guys got it figured out.
Yeah, there's a lot of little niche things that you figure out, but there's always good barbecue down south. So we got some good barbecue joints as well.
That's perfect. Oh man, well, it's been great having you on the show, Big T.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we had I think, great conversation today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to talk about the fishing up there or book a trip?
You can just shoot me an email, Big T at Big T Fly Fishing, and visit the website. You can contact us through the website, which is bigtflyfishing.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again for being on the show. It was really great to have you.
I appreciate it. Look forward to you coming down and visiting.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you for listening. And we will post a bunch of great photos that Big T has sent me already of some big fish and beautiful area. And maybe a couple of these top fly picks he's been mentioning. We'll put those on our Facebook and Instagram pages. As always, you can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. And if you like the show, hey, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.